The door to the bakery swung open with such force that Olivia Reeves nearly dropped the tray of sourdough loaves she had just pulled from the brick oven. And when she turned to scold whoever had barged in so carelessly, the words died on her lips at the sight of the man swaying in her doorway like a willow in a storm. His clothes hung off his frame in tatters. Dust caked so thick on his skin that she could barely make out his features, and his eyes held the kind of desperate hunger that made her heart clench despite her better judgment. This was Bodie, California, in the spring of 1878, a mining town that had seen its share of desperate men, but something about this particular cowboy made her forget every warning her mother had ever given her about trusting strangers. "Please," he rasped, his voice like gravel scraping against wood. "I have not eaten in 4 days." Olivia set down her tray and wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron, studying him carefully. She was 22 years old and had been running this bakery alone since her father died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and the stubborn determination not to lose the only thing that remained of her family. The shop was small, wedged between a saloon and a general store on Main Street, but it was hers, and she had fought tooth and nail to keep it running even as creditors circled like vultures. "I do not have much," she said slowly, watching the way he gripped the door frame to keep himself upright. "But I will not turn away a starving man." She moved to the counter where the day's leftover bread sat waiting to be sold at a discount tomorrow morning, picked up 2 thick slices of wheat bread and a small chunk of cheese she had been saving for her own supper, and wrapped them in brown paper. When she turned back, the cowboy had moved closer, and she could see him better now in the afternoon light streaming through her front windows. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Sierra Nevada mountains. Despite the grime and exhaustion, there was something striking about his face, something that made her fingers tremble slightly as she handed him the package. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "I will repay you somehow, I swear it." "Just eat," Olivia told him, trying to sound practical even as her heart did something foolish in her chest. "And there is a pump out back if you need water." He nodded and tore into the bread right there in her shop, eating with the kind of single-minded focus that told her he had not been exaggerating about the 4 days. She turned away to give him some privacy, busying herself with arranging the remaining loaves in the display case, but she could feel his presence behind her like heat from the oven. "What is your name?" she asked without turning around. "William," he said between bites. "William Armstrong. I came here from Nevada, thought I could find work in the mines like everyone else." "And did you?" he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I found trouble instead. Got robbed my first week here, lost everything I had including my horse. Been trying to earn enough for a meal ever since, but nobody wants to hire a man with no tools and no reputation." Olivia turned to face him then, saw the shame burning in his eyes alongside the hunger, and made a decision that probably would have horrified her more sensible self. "I need help," she said. "My oven is acting up, needs someone who knows their way around metalwork to fix it, and there are sacks of flour in the back that need moving. If you are willing to work, I can pay you in meals and a few coins." William stared at her as if she had just offered him the moon. "You would trust me, a stranger." "I am trusting you not to make me regret it," Olivia said firmly. "Can you start tomorrow morning?" "I can start right now," he said, straightening up despite his obvious exhaustion. "Just point me to what needs doing." She should have sent him away to rest, should have been more cautious, but something in his eyes told her that he needed this work as much as she needed the help. So she led him to the back room, where 50-pound sacks of flour sat stacked against the wall. Needing to be moved to the storage shed out back before the summer heat made the room unbearable. William set to work without another word, hoisting the sacks over his shoulder with a strength that surprised her given his half-starved state. She watched him for a moment, then returned to the front of the shop as the bell above the door jingled to announce a customer. Mrs. Patterson swept in with her usual air of self-importance, her silk dress rustling as she approached the counter. She was the wife of one of the mine owners, a woman who took great pleasure in reminding everyone of her elevated status in this rough mining town. 2 loaves of your white bread, she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. And make sure they are fresh. Last week's were too dense. Olivia bit back a sharp retort and wrapped the bread with practiced efficiency. That will be 20 cents, Mrs. Patterson counted out the coins with exaggerated slowness, then paused as William emerged from the back room, sweat already staining his tattered shirt. Her eyes narrowed with disapproval. Olivia Reeves, surely you are not allowing that filthy drifter to handle your supplies, she said loud enough for William to hear. People will talk. Then let them talk, Olivia replied coolly, surprised by her own boldness. William is my new employee and he is working honestly for his pay. Mrs. Patterson sniffed and gathered her packages. Your father would be horrified to see what you have done with his shop. Hiring vagrants, falling behind on your debts. Mark my words, girl, you will lose everything before summer's end. The words struck deep because Olivia feared they might be true. She owed 3 months' rent to Mr. Harrington, who owned the building, plus money to the flour mill and the bank that had loaned her father money for the new oven. Every day was a struggle to make enough to cover her costs, and she was slowly drowning in debt no matter how hard she worked. William watched Mrs. Patterson leave, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. You did not have to defend me. Yes, I did, Olivia said quietly, because she was wrong. Something shifted in his expression then, a softening around his eyes that made her look away quickly, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the shop. She busied herself cleaning the counter, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her stomach. The flour is moved, William said after a moment. What else needs doing? They fell into an easy rhythm after that. Olivia showed him the temperamental oven that tended to heat unevenly, explained how the damper stuck and needed constant adjustment. William listened carefully, asked intelligent questions, and by the time the sun began to set, he had taken the whole thing apart and put it back together with adjustments that made it draw better than it had in months. You know your way around machinery, Olivia observed, kneading dough for tomorrow's morning loaves. My father was a blacksmith, William explained, wiping his hands on a rag. Taught me everything he knew before he died. I thought I might set up my own shop someday, but then my mother got sick and the doctor's bills ate through our savings. After she passed, there was nothing keeping me in Virginia, so I headed west like everyone else chasing the promise of gold. I am sorry, Olivia said, and meant it. About your parents. I am sorry about yours too, he replied. I saw the notice board at the general store. Your father was well respected. She nodded, her hands working the dough with more force than necessary. He was a good man, worked himself to exhaustion trying to keep this place going. I think in the end, his heart just gave out from the strain. And now you are doing the same thing, William observed gently. Olivia looked up sharply, ready to defend herself, but the concern in his eyes was genuine. She sighed and shaped the dough into loaves, setting them aside to rise overnight. I do not have a choice, she said. This bakery is all I have left. If I lose it, I lose everything he worked for. How bad is it? William asked. The debt, I mean. She should not have told him. He was a stranger she had known for all of 3 hours, But there was something about the way he asked, the genuine care in his voice that made the words spill out. $300, she admitted. That is what I owe between the rent, the suppliers, and the bank. I make enough to cover my daily expenses and a little extra, but at this rate, it will take me 2 years to pay everything off, and Mr. Harrington wants at least the back rent within 3 months, or he will evict me. William was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. What if you could expand, offer more than just bread? With what money? Olivia laughed bitterly. I can barely afford flour. I am just thinking out loud, he said. But a town like this, full of miners with money to spend and no wives to cook for them, they would pay well for good food. Pies, pastries, maybe even hot meals. It is a nice dream, Olivia said softly, but dreams require capital I do not have. She paid him $1 for his work that day, plus gave him another package of bread and cheese to take with him. He tried to refuse the food, saying he had already eaten, but she insisted. You need to build your strength back up, she said firmly. And I expect you here at dawn tomorrow if you still want the work. I will be here, William promised, and the smile he gave her made something warm unfurl in her chest. He showed up the next morning before the sun had fully risen, clean-shaven and with his hair washed, looking almost like a different person. Olivia was already elbow-deep in dough, and she directed him to start the fire in the oven while she finished shaping the loaves. They worked side by side as the town slowly came to life around them, and Olivia found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. There was something compelling about the way he moved, efficient and purposeful, and the way he seemed to anticipate what she needed before she asked. You did not tell me where you spent the night, she said, as she slid the first batch of bread into the oven. William's expression shuddered slightly. I found a spot in the livery stable. The owner does not mind as long as I am gone before he opens for business. That is no way to live, Olivia protested. It is better than sleeping on the street, he replied with a shrug that was clearly meant to seem careless, but did not quite hide the embarrassment in his eyes. Olivia opened her mouth to say something more, but the bell above the door chimed and customers began trickling in for their morning bread. The next few hours passed in a blur of transactions and baking, and she was grateful for William's presence as he helped lift heavy trays and kept the oven fed with wood. It was mid-morning when trouble arrived in the form of Mr. Harrington himself. He was a tall man with a prosperous belly and cold eyes that calculated profit in every glance. He swept into the bakery with the air of someone who owned everything he saw, which in this case was technically true. Miss Reeves, he said, his voice carrying false warmth. I hope business is going well. Well enough, Olivia replied carefully, wiping her hands on her apron. Good, good, Mr. Harrington said, but his eyes were already tallying the customers in the shop, assessing the inventory on her shelves. I wanted to remind you that your rent payment is due at the end of the week, all 3 months as we discussed. I remember our agreement, Olivia said, fighting to keep her voice steady, but I need more time. I cannot possibly raise $90 by Friday. That is unfortunate, Mr. Harrington said, not sounding unfortunate at all. But I have been more than patient. I have other potential tenants interested in this location. The Red Rose Saloon next door wants to expand, and they are willing to pay twice what you are currently paying. This is my father's shop, Olivia said, and she hated how her voice trembled. You knew him for 20 years. And I gave you 6 months out of respect for his memory, Mr. Harrington replied. But business is business, Miss Reeves. I need the money by Friday, or I will have no choice but to begin eviction proceedings. William stepped forward then, his presence solid and protective beside her. The lady said she needs more time, Mr. Harrington's eyes flicked over William dismissively. And who might you be? Someone who thinks a man of means could afford to show a bit more compassion, William said evenly. Compassion does not pay bills, Mr. Harrington snapped. Friday, Miss Reeves, do not make me come back here again. He left in a rustle of expensive fabric, and Olivia felt her knees go weak. She gripped the counter for support, trying to breathe through the panic squeezing her chest. I cannot raise $90 in 3 days, she whispered. Even if I sold every loaf I bake between now and then. William's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steadying. We will think of something. She looked up at him, surprised. You gave me food when I was starving, he said simply. You gave me work when no one else would. That means something to me. Over the next 3 days, they tried everything. Olivia baked extra loaves and William hawked them on street corners. They made meat pies that sold well but not well enough. They worked from before dawn until long after dark, but Thursday night found them sitting at the workbench in the back room, counting out $62.30. It was more money than Olivia had seen in months, but it was not enough. I failed, she said, staring at the coins spread across the wood. I failed him. Your father? William asked gently. She nodded, tears burning in her eyes. He built this place from nothing. Worked every day of his life to make it successful, and I am losing it after just 6 months. You have not failed, William said fiercely. You have fought harder than anyone could expect. This is not your fault. It feels like it is, she whispered. William was quiet for a moment, then he reached out and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Olivia looked up in surprise, meeting his eyes in the lamplight. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to trust me. What is it? That robbery I told you about when I first got to Bodie. He took a deep breath. It was not entirely true. I mean, I did get robbed, but not of money. They took a map. A map, Olivia repeated, confused. My father, before he died, he did some work for a prospector back in Virginia. The man paid him with information instead of cash, told him about a silver deposit up in the hills east of here. Said it was on unclaimed land, but he was too old to work it himself. My father drew a map and always meant to come west to check it out, but he never got the chance. I brought that map with me, thought I would try my luck, but then those men jumped me and took everything. Why are you telling me this now? Olivia asked. Because I have been watching the assay office, William said. And 3 days ago, 2 men brought in silver ore to be tested. High-grade stuff. I recognized them. They were the ones who robbed me. Olivia's mind raced. So they found the silver using your map. I think so, William said. And I have been trying to figure out where they are working. I followed them yesterday, way up into the hills past the main mining claims. I think I know where the deposit is. William, that is dangerous, Olivia said, squeezing his hand without thinking. Those men already robbed you once. If they catch you snooping around their claim, they might do worse. I know, he said quietly. But I keep thinking, if there is silver up there like my father believed, and if I could get to it, stake a proper claim before those thieves can file papers on it, I could help you. I could help us both. Us. The word came out softer than she intended. William's eyes met hers, and in them she saw something that made her heart skip. These past few days, working here with you, it has been the happiest I have been since I left home. You did not just give me bread, Olivia. You gave me hope. You made me feel like I mattered. And I know I have no right to say this. No, I am just a broke cowboy with nothing to his name, but I care about you. More than I probably should after just a few days. William, she breathed, and she did not know if she meant it as a protest or a prayer. Let me try, he said urgently. Let me go up there tomorrow morning, stake a claim, see if there really is silver. If there is, I can file the papers and we can work it together. If there is not, well, we will be no worse off than we are now. And if those men catch you, they will not, William promised. I will be careful. Olivia knew she should say no, knew this was reckless and dangerous and probably foolish. But she looked at the $62.30 on the table, looked at William's earnest face, and found herself nodding. Be careful, she said. Please. I will, he promised, and then he did something that surprised them both. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. I will be back before noon tomorrow. Trust me. He left before she could respond, and Olivia sat alone in the lamplight, her hand pressed to her forehead where she could still feel the ghost of his kiss, wondering what she had just agreed to. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. Olivia went through the motions of opening the bakery, mixing dough and stoking the oven, but her mind was miles away in the hills east of town. Every time the door opened, her heart leaped, hoping to see William walk through. But it was not William who came at mid-morning. It was Mr. Harrington, punctual as death. Miss Reeves, he said, I trust you have the rent money. Olivia wiped her flour-covered hands and walked to the counter where she had left the tin containing their earnings. I have $62.30, she said. I know it is not the full amount, but if you could just give me one more week. We had an agreement, Mr. Harrington interrupted. $90 by today. Please, Olivia said, and she was not too proud to beg. Just a few more days. I am expecting money to come through. I just need a little more time. Mr. Harrington's expression was unyielding. I am sorry, Miss Reeves, but I cannot make exceptions. I will give you until Monday to clear out your belongings. After that, I will have the sheriff remove anything remaining. Monday, Olivia's voice cracked, but that is only 3 days. It is more than generous considering the circumstances, Mr. Harrington said. Good day, Miss Reeves. He left, and Olivia stood frozen behind her counter, staring at the loaves of bread cooling on the racks, the flour sacks in the corner, her father's old apron hanging by the door. Everything she had fought for, everything her father had built, gone. The door burst open and Olivia's heart surged with hope, but it was not William. It was Sheriff Dawson, a gruff man in his 50s who had always been kind to her father. Miss Olivia, he said, taking off his hat. I hate to bother you, but I need to ask about the man who has been working for you. William Armstrong, cold dread flooded through her. What about him? There was some trouble up in the hills this morning, the sheriff said carefully. 2 miners came in saying someone was trying to jump their claim. There was a fight, some shots fired. Nobody was killed, but we are looking for a man matching Armstrong's description. He was not jumping a claim, Olivia said quickly. He was trying to stake his own claim on unclaimed land. That is not what the miners are saying, Sheriff Dawson replied. They are claiming he tried to steal ore from their site. If you know where he is, Miss Olivia, it would be better for him to come in peacefully. I do not know where he is, Olivia said truthfully, her mind racing. He left early this morning and said he would be back by noon. The sheriff nodded slowly. If you see him, tell him to come find me. I would rather settle this civilized-like. After he left, Olivia could not stand still. She paced the small shop, checking the window every few seconds, her stomach twisted in knots. Where was William? Was he hurt? Arrested? Or worse? The sun climbed higher, and noon came and went with no sign of him. Olivia sold bread mechanically to the few customers who came in, her mind conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios. She was just about to close up and go looking for him herself when the door opened one more time. William stood in the doorway, and Olivia's relief was so profound she nearly collapsed. He looked exhausted, with fresh bruises on his face and his shirt torn, but he was alive and whole and here. William, she gasped, rushing around the counter. "The sheriff is looking for you. Those men said you tried to steal from their claim." "I know," William said, and despite everything, he was smiling. "But they were lying. That claim was never filed properly. I checked at the land office first thing this morning. The land is unclaimed, and I staked it legal and proper before those thieves even knew I was there." "You did?" Olivia could barely breathe. "I did," William confirmed. "And Olivia, my father was right. There is silver there, a lot of it. I brought samples to the assay office, and they confirmed it is high-grade ore, the kind that could make a person very wealthy. But the sheriff, I already talked to him," William said. "Showed him my claim papers and explained the whole situation. Those other men are the ones in trouble now for trying to work land they do not own. The sheriff sent deputies up to run them off." Olivia stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "So you really did it? You found silver?" "We did it," William corrected, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small leather pouch and set it on the counter. "I did not have time to work the claim proper, but I found some loose ore near the surface and sold it to a private buyer for immediate cash. It is not a fortune, but it is a start." Olivia opened the pouch with shaking hands and stared at the gold coins inside. She counted once, then again to be sure. $240. "William," she whispered, "this is enough to pay off all my debts with money to spare." "That was the idea," he said softly. "You gave me bread when I was starving. I wanted to give you something back. Your shop, your father's legacy, you should not lose it." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks before she could stop them. She looked at this man, this stranger who had walked into her bakery 5 days ago desperate and half dead from hunger, who had worked beside her and believed in her, and then risked everything to save her father's shop. "Why?" she asked through her tears. "Why would you do this for me?" William reached up and gently brushed the tears from her cheeks, his calloused fingers impossibly tender against her skin. "I think you know why." And she did. She saw it in his eyes, the same impossible feeling that had been growing in her own heart since that first day. It was too fast, too sudden, too reckless to fall in love with someone in less than a week. But standing there in the afternoon light, with $240 in gold coins on the counter between them and her father's bakery saved, Olivia realized she did not care about should or should not. "I am falling in love with you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "And I know that is crazy because we barely know each other, but it is true." William's smile was brighter than any gold he could have brought her. "Then we are both crazy," he said. "Because I have been falling in love with you since you handed me that first piece of bread and treated me like a human being instead of a burden." He kissed her then, really kissed her, and Olivia melted into him with a sigh of relief and joy. His arms came around her waist, solid and sure, and she wound her hands into his hair, pouring 5 days of worry and hope and desperate affection into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia laughed through her tears. "I should pay Mr. Harrington. Before I lose my nerve." "Wait," William said, catching her hand. "There is something else we need to talk about. That silver claim, I staked it in both our names. You and me, equal partners. Because none of this would mean anything if I could not share it with you." "William, you cannot just give me half a silver mine," Olivia protested weakly. "I am not giving you anything," he said firmly. "I am offering you a partnership. In the mine, in the bakery if you will have me, and maybe in everything else too if you think you could stand having a busted cowboy around permanently." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Olivia asked, her heart hammering. "Eventually," William said with a crooked smile. "I figure I should court you proper first. Take you to dinner, walk you home, do things the right way. But yes, That is exactly what I am working toward if you will have me." "I will have you," Olivia said, and kissed him again to seal the promise. They went to Mr. Harrington's office together, and Olivia took great satisfaction in counting out $90 in gold coins while the landlord watched with barely concealed surprise. Then they went to the flour mill and the bank and settled every outstanding debt, until Olivia walked out into the summer sunshine owing nothing to anyone for the first time since her father died. "What do we do now?" she asked William as they stood on Main Street, the whole afternoon stretching before them. "Now," William said, taking her hand, "we start building our future." The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity and joy. William spent his days working the silver claim with help from a few hired men, and the mine proved even richer than they had hoped. Olivia expanded the bakery, adding the pies and pastries William had suggested, and business boomed as miners flush with silver money lined up for her baked goods. But more than the financial success, it was the small domestic moments that Olivia treasured. William moved out of the livery stable and into a proper boarding house, but he still showed up at the bakery before dawn every morning to help with the baking before heading up to the mine. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side, stealing kisses when the shop was empty, talking late into the evening about their dreams for the future. William courted her properly as promised, taking her to dinner at the hotel restaurant, walking her home through Bodie's dusty streets, sitting with her on the bench outside the bakery as the sun set over the mountains. He told her stories about his childhood in Virginia, about his father's blacksmith shop and his mother's garden. Olivia shared memories of her own father, the way he used to let her help mix dough when she was small, how he would sing old songs in German while the bread baked. 3 months after that first fateful day, William took Olivia up to see the mine. It was a beautiful autumn morning, the aspens turning gold in the hills, and as they stood looking out over the valley with Bodie spread below them, William got down on one knee. "I know I am not much," he said, pulling a small ring from his pocket. "Just a cowboy who got lucky, but I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. You saved my life, Olivia Reeves, and I want to spend the rest of it making you happy. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a small diamond, and it was the most beautiful thing Olivia had ever seen. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married in November of 1878 in the small church at the edge of town. Half of Bodie turned out for the wedding, including Sheriff Dawson and even Mrs. Patterson, who had softened considerably toward Olivia once she became one of the more prosperous business owners in town. Olivia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper, and William wore a new suit that he had ordered special from San Francisco. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and William kissed her in front of God and everyone, Olivia felt her father's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder, blessing this union. They moved into a small house on the outskirts of town, with a view of the mountains and enough land for a garden. William continued to work the mine with increasing success, while Olivia ran the bakery with help from 2 girls she had hired as business continued to grow. They talked about expanding further, maybe buying the building next door if the saloon ever wanted to sell. But their greatest joy came in the summer of 1879, when Olivia realized she was pregnant. William had been worried about her working so hard at the bakery, but she assured him that she felt wonderful, better than ever actually, glowing with the health of a woman carrying a wanted child. "What do you want?" William asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her growing belly. "A boy or a girl, healthy," Olivia said. "That is all I want." "Practical as always," William teased, kissing her temple. But if you had to choose, I think a boy would be nice, Olivia admitted. Someone to carry on your father's name. Someone to teach about metalwork and mining and all the things you know. And if it is a girl, William asked, then we teach her to bake bread and run a business and stand on her own 2 feet, Olivia said firmly. Either way, our child will know they are loved and wanted and valued. Their son was born in March of 1880, arriving in the world with a lusty cry that announced his strong lungs and stronger will. They named him Thomas, after William's father, and from the moment Olivia held that tiny, perfect baby in her arms, she understood a depth of love she had never imagined possible. William was a devoted father, getting up in the night to walk Thomas when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, gazing at his son with such naked adoration that it made Olivia fall in love with him all over again. They brought Thomas to the bakery sometimes, setting up a cradle in the back room where he could sleep while they worked, and the customers loved catching glimpses of the baby. Life in Bodie continued to prosper. The silver mine produced consistently, allowing them to save money and invest in other ventures. William bought the building that housed the bakery, so they would never again face the threat of losing it to an unscrupulous landlord. They expanded into the space next door after the saloon did eventually relocate to a larger building on the main street, turning it into a proper restaurant that served hot meals alongside the baked goods. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. He was walking before his first birthday, running shortly after, keeping them both constantly on their toes. When he was 2, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again, and this time she was hoping for a girl. But their second child, born in the autumn of 1882, was another boy. They named him Samuel, after Olivia's father, and he was as different from his brother as could be. Where Thomas was active and boisterous, Samuel was quiet and thoughtful, content to sit and observe the world around him with serious eyes. 2 boys, William said, holding Samuel while Thomas climbed over his legs. We are outnumbered, my love. There is still time for a daughter, Olivia pointed out, though privately she was perfectly content with her 2 healthy sons. The years rolled on, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Bodie's boom years began to fade as the easy silver ran out, and many families left for new opportunities elsewhere. But William's mine continued to produce, in part because he had invested in proper equipment and hired good men who knew how to dig deep and shore up the tunnels safely. The bakery and restaurant remained successful too, becoming an institution in the town. Olivia trained her employees well, eventually promoting one of them to manager so she could spend more time with her growing sons while still overseeing the business. When Thomas was 6 and Samuel was 4, Olivia finally got her daughter. Margaret was born in the spring of 1886, a tiny thing with a powerful set of lungs and her father's storm-gray eyes. William wept when he held her for the first time, this precious girl child he had never quite let himself hope for. She is perfect, he whispered, touching Margaret's tiny fingers. Like her mother. She is going to be a handful, Olivia predicted, watching her daughter's determined little face. I can already tell. She was right. Margaret grew up fierce and fearless, keeping pace with her older brothers and refusing to be left behind or treated as delicate simply because she was a girl. Olivia taught her to bake and to manage money, while William taught her to ride and to assess ore quality. Their daughter was going to be a force to be reckoned with, and they could not be prouder. By 1890, Bodie had settled into a quieter existence. The wild boom town days were behind it, but a stable community remained. William's mine still produced enough to keep them comfortable, and the bakery continued to serve the townspeople, and the smaller but steadier stream of miners who still worked claims in the surrounding hills. Thomas, at 10 years old, showed an interest in engineering and was already talking about going to university to study. Samuel, at 8, loved books and learning and seemed destined for something scholarly. Margaret, at 4, declared she was going to be a baker like her mama and also own a mine like her papa, seeing no reason why she could not do both. On a warm summer evening, William and Olivia sat on the porch of their home, watching their 3 children play in the yard as the sun set over the mountains. It was hard to believe that 12 years had passed since that desperate morning when William had stumbled into her bakery, half dead from hunger and hope. "Do you ever think about it?" Olivia asked, her hand in William's. "That first day." "Every day," William admitted. "I think about how close I came to giving up entirely. If I had passed your bakery, if I had been too proud to beg for food, if you had turned me away like you had every right to do." "I could never have turned you away," Olivia said softly. "Even then, even not knowing you, something told me you were important. You saved my life," William said, squeezing her hand. "In every way a person can be saved." "And you saved mine," Olivia replied. "My father's legacy, my home, my future, everything." "We saved each other," William corrected, pulling her close. "That is how it is supposed to work." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Thomas teach Samuel how to skip stones in the water trough while Margaret demanded to be included. The evening air was sweet with the smell of sage and pine, and somewhere in town, someone was playing a fiddle. "I am glad you were starving," Olivia said suddenly, then laughed at how that sounded. "I mean, I am not glad you suffered, but I am glad it brought you to me." "Best thing that ever happened to me, that robbery," William agreed with a grin, "though I would not recommend it as a courtship strategy for our sons." "God help us when they start courting," Olivia said. "Especially Thomas. He has your stubbornness." "And Samuel has your ability to overthink everything," William pointed out. "Margaret, though, she is going to break hearts." "Not for many, many years," Olivia said firmly, making William laugh. As the years continued to pass, their family remained close-knit and loving. William eventually sold the mine in 1895 for a substantial sum, deciding he would rather spend his time with his family than underground. The mine had served its purpose, giving them security and opportunity, but it had never been his passion the way the bakery was Olivia's. Instead, he opened a blacksmith and metalwork shop, returning to his father's trade with the skills he had never forgotten. He found he loved the work, the creativity and craftsmanship of it, and soon he was known throughout the region for his quality work. Thomas did go to university, studying engineering in San Francisco, and eventually returning to work on improving mining safety and equipment throughout the West. Samuel became a teacher, opening a school in Bodie that served the children of the remaining mining families and the ranchers in the surrounding valleys. Margaret, true to her word, took over management of the bakery and restaurant when she was just 18, showing a head for business that impressed everyone who met her. William and Olivia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines, but their love never diminishing. They were the couple everyone in Bodie pointed to as an example of what marriage should be. Partners in every sense of the word, still stealing kisses in the bakery when they thought no one was looking. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children threw them a celebration at the restaurant. The whole town turned out, and speech after speech praised Olivia's generosity and William's integrity, the way they had contributed to the community not just with business and employment, but with kindness and example. "I want to say something," William announced when it was his turn to speak, standing with Olivia at his side. 25 years ago, I walked into a bakery with nothing. No money, no prospects, no hope, and a beautiful woman gave me bread. Olivia smiled, knowing this story, having heard him tell it before, but never tiring of it. But she did not just give me bread, William continued, his voice thick with emotion. She gave me dignity. She gave me work. She gave me purpose. And eventually, she gave me her heart, which was the greatest treasure I could ever have hoped to find. People talk about the silver mine, about luck and fortune, but my real fortune walked into my life the moment I walked into hers. Arguably, you walked into mine, Olivia interjected with a smile, making everyone laugh. True, William conceded, pulling her close. But either way, I am the luckiest man alive. To my wife, my partner, my love, thank you for saving a starving cowboy 25 years ago. It was the best investment you ever made. The only investment that mattered, Olivia agreed, kissing him while their children groaned good-naturedly, and the crowd applauded. They had many more good years together after that. They became grandparents when Thomas married and had children of his own, then again when Samuel did the same. Margaret eventually married a mining engineer who appreciated her sharp mind and independent spirit, giving them a third set of grandchildren to spoil. William and Olivia spent their later years in the house with the mountain view, tending their garden, walking into town to visit the bakery, sitting on the porch in the evenings as they had done for decades. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes from years of deep understanding. When William passed away in 1918, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Olivia holding his hand. He was 65 years old and had lived a full, rich life, beyond anything he could have imagined when he stumbled into a bakery in Bodie all those years ago. Olivia mourned him deeply, as did their children and grandchildren, and the whole community that had known and respected him. But even in her grief, she took comfort in knowing they had built something beautiful together. A family, a legacy, a love story that would be told in Bodie for generations. She lived another 7 years after William's passing, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She still visited the bakery regularly, though Margaret ran it now, and she loved nothing more than when her grandchildren came to visit, and she could teach them to make bread the way her father had taught her. When Olivia died in 1925 at the age of 69, it was surrounded by her children and grandchildren, in the house she had shared with William, with the smell of fresh baked bread drifting through the windows from the bakery in town. Her last words were, "Tell your grandfather I am coming home." They buried her next to William in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Bodie, with a simple gravestone that read, Olivia Reeves Armstrong, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She gave bread to the hungry and love to all who knew her. Years later, their grandchildren would tell the story to their own children about how their grandmother had given bread to a starving cowboy, and how that cowboy had returned with enough gold to buy her shop, but more importantly, had given her a lifetime of love. It became a family legend, a reminder that kindness to strangers can change everything, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the people who need saving the most are the ones who end up saving us. The bakery remained in the Armstrong family for 3 more generations, always keeping the name Reeves Bakery in honor of Olivia's father who had started it all. And though Bodie eventually became a ghost town, preserved as a historic site, the story of the baker and the cowboy lived on, a testament to the kind of love that transforms not just 2 people, but entire communities and generations. It was a love story born from desperation and kindness, from silver and flour, from a moment when one person chose to see another's humanity instead of their circumstances. And in the end, That was the real treasure that William and Olivia had found together, more valuable than any silver mine, sweeter than any bread. They had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found home.